From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Annabella Punti. Tonight we take a look at the political stories impacting our community, from efforts to get firefighter coverage for cancer diagnosis to a play that's exploring issues dreamers face.
Some firefighters in Arizona are fighting more than just fires. They're fighting their city governments and insurance companies to receive the benefits they need to treat their cancer.
Now those firefighters could be receiving some help from the state. Reporter Dylan McKim has more on how Arizona could become the first state to pass an ironclad workman's compensation law.
It's a story all too familiar among the firefighter community. An Arizona firefighter is diagnosed with cancer after years of being exposed to dangerous carcinogens on the job. They submit a workman's compensation claim only to be denied and told their cancer is not work-related. According to the Industrial Commission, 25% of those claims have been denied since April of last year. Now, Arizona lawmakers are stepping in and closing a loophole that they say many cities and insurance companies have taken advantage of. Laundry at Fire Station 504 isn't just a chore. It saves lives. Dirty turnouts were once a badge of honor. Now, that thinking has shifted.
We realize now that these unburnt products of combustion are causing our members cancer and it's killing us. So we've taken proactive steps to get ahead of this.
Because of the increased incidence of cancer among firefighters, they're taking new precautions to ensure deadly carcinogens are not coming home with them. And once the fire is out, the firefighters will bring out their decontamination kits. Now, these have trash bags where they can put their old turnouts, and it also has hoses and brushes and soaps so that they can clean their turnouts to make sure all the carcinogens are completely off.
And we wash the gross decontaminants off of our gear.
These protections were not available to prevent Peter Benzing's cancer.
I thought it'd be very unlikely that I would get a cancer diagnosis.
Benzing had worked for the Casa Grande Fire Department for 10 years when he learned he had prostate cancer.
They were able to determine that they were very aggressive cancer cells.
He had no family history of cancer, was in good health, and he exercised regularly. A study done by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health found that firefighters have a 28% increased risk of getting prostate cancer.
We noticed that a lot of our members, not only within our fire department, but nationwide, were losing their lives and livelihoods to cancer.
But firefighters are not alone in this fight. In Arizona in 2017, lawmakers passed a bill that helps firefighters who get certain cancers while on the job.
So in 2017, we thought we were perfectly clear that we expected firefighters to be able to file for workman compensation benefits. Unfortunately, government being what government is, has found a way to work around the bill that we put in place.
Despite the law, Benzing's workman's comp claim was denied by the city. An independent medical exam found there was no hardcore evidence that Benzing's cancer was caused by carcinogens on the job, leaving him with big medical bills, legal bills, and a pile of stress.
The two things that fuel cancer cells the most are stress and sugar. I can give up the sugar, I can control the sugar, but it's difficult for me to control the stress.
Now, some state senators want to prevent this from happening to others.
There will be no more guessing whether you will or not receive your benefits. You will receive your benefits.
The proposed legislation takes the burden of proof off the firefighters. Now, having a cancer diagnosis is all the evidence they need.
Now, our firefighters will be able to focus on fighting cancer and not fighting government for their benefits.
That's good news for Benzing, who has more on his hands than most. After his wife died from cancer in 2016, he became a single father to his daughter, Alex, a task made harder during his recovery.
And, you know, it was frustrating because I couldn't pick her up. She's very physical, she likes to jump. Socks.
Benzing's treatment was successful, and his life is getting back to normal. And while he is still fighting to protect firefighters like him, he always finds time for his daughter.
There's seems to be a little less me time, and I'm perfectly fine with it. Perfectly fine with it, because she's a lot of fun to be around, and we have a good time together.
There is one more proposed change coming from the legislature that will add to the list of presumptive cancers that are covered. Ovarian and breast cancers will be covered, extending coverage to Arizona's female firefighters. In the studio, Dylan McKim, Cronkite News.
The 2020 legislative session has begun, and 2 Democratic representatives have proposed legalizing adult use of marijuana. Representatives Randall Freese and Isela Blanc are hoping the legalization will cut down on arrest and other problems. Delaney White explains how.
For neuropathy and for service-connected PTSD.
U.S. veteran Timothy Pena says he uses marijuana to cope with post-traumatic stress disorder. Timothy was arrested in 2014 for possession of marijuana. It was his first-time offense, and he was sentenced to 2 years in Arizona Department of Corrections. Pena did not possess a medical card at that time. He says he couldn't afford one. If the current bills that have been introduced to the legislature become law, they would decrease the number of arrests and promote successful treatment and recovery outcomes.
This is the reality. It's here. It's not going anywhere. So it's time for modern minds to melt and get around this and pass this for the safety, these bills for the safety of the citizens and for the needs of the health that cannabis provides.
Michael Weiser, the executive director of the Arizona State chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, is working to reform marijuana policy and advocacy for cannabis consumers.
We're hoping that if Representative Blackman's bill, police deflection bill, does pass, that it will reduce the number of people who get arrested in Arizona for cannabis. It's based on a program out of Tucson, and we'd like to see it rolled out statewide.
If passed, Arizona House Bill 2638 will cut down on the number of arrests for people who are in a situation similar to Timothy's. But passing these bills will not come without challenges.
There's a stigma with cannabis, with marijuana, right? There's a stigma that deals just because of what it is, right? And what it has been. So with that stigma comes the ability to talk to people to make them understand what it is and what it isn't.
Legalization of marijuana, especially for veterans, is one. Marijuana is the only substance that I have found that has a direct effect on my PTSD. It is the only substance that I can take, whether it's alcohol or opioids or whatever. Marijuana is the only thing that keeps my PTSD in check.
Voters may also be able to weigh in on the issue. The Smart and Safe Act is an initiative that would legalize the sale, possession, and consumption of 1 ounce of marijuana for adults at least 21 years old. The Smart and Safe Act is likely to meet the requirements to be on the November 2020 ballot. Live in the Broadcast Center, Delaney White, Cronkite News.
The state prison in Florence will be shutting down operations and moving its inmates to other state and private prisons around Arizona.
It's to decrease the town's population and state funding. Dylan McKim was in Florence to see what impacts the town faces with the impending closure.
Governor Doug Ducey announced at his State of the State address that he will be closing down the Florence State Prison. He claimed the closure will save taxpayers over $270 million over 3 years. But there are still questions left to be answered, including the monetary impact when the prison closes its cell doors for good.
There's another marker we're going to meet this year. We're shutting down a state prison.
Just like that, Governor Doug Ducey notified the state that he was closing a prison, a statement that not only shocked viewers, but also the people who are running the town of Florence.
We were a little concerned.
The prison has been an important part of the historic community. Opening in 1908, the prison is older than Arizona.
We have a lot of residents that work at the facility, and then we have a lot of residents that work at businesses that support the operations there.
Not only does the prison employ residents, but it also contributes to their population.
When we are all inclusive, we have about 26,500 residents, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, and that's about 17,000 inmates.
3,623 of those inmates will now have to leave, hurting Florence's share of state revenue.
Any loss of population could similarly impact the revenues that we receive from the state.
The town estimates they will lose $1.3 million of state revenue, but other losses are not so easy to calculate.
If we have people coming in to visit their friends or family members that may be incarcerated, they'll stop by and have lunch or have dinner at our local restaurants, or they'll stop and get gas at the local gas station.
And they also shop.
one day a month or whenever their visiting days are, there's kind of a little rush of visitors.
Pecos BB's leather shop has been open for a year.
We've had a lot of new stores open on Main Street in the last 2 years, probably, and it's just getting bigger.
And she's not too worried about the loss of inmates.
I don't think it'll really affect us that much concerning that. I don't think it'll be a big impact on us.
But something the town leaders are concerned about involves their water treatment facility.
The Florence State Prison Complex sends their waste stream to our wastewater treatment center.
The town receives $750,000 to treat and recharge that water back into the ground, revenue that will likely be gone when the prison closes.
That operation still has to continue operating, and because of that, it's possible that our rates would have to increase in a commensurate form to offset the loss.
There is no timetable for when the prison will close its doors, but town officials are making sure when it does, the impact will not be as severe.
Anything we can do to participate with the state and make sure that those impacts are minimized, we're going to try to do.
The state is now looking for room in other state-run and private prisons to put the displaced inmates. As for the guards that worked at Florence Prison, they will all be able to keep their jobs and transfer over to the Iman facility located down the road from Florence. In the newsroom, Dylan McKim, Cronkite News.
With the 2020 presidential election just a few months away, the Arizona Secretary of State's office is ramping up security measures to ensure voters feel confident at the polls. Even though the state's election department says there aren't any imminent dangers to voting systems, they are still encouraging voters and election officials to be prepared for the possibility of hacking and interference. Cronkite News reporter Marcela Bayeto learned what the state is doing differently.
The environment in which we conduct elections has changed a lot.
And Secretary of State Katie Hobbs's top mission to improve security measures for elections across the state. With Arizona being considered a battleground state in the upcoming presidential election, Hobbs says the issue of security is critical now more than ever.
Arizona is sort of a state that's going to be a hard-fought state on the national stage, and so we want to be prepared.
The state is focusing on 3 main security measures. The first involving physical security of polling equipment outlined in this election procedures manual.
It addresses things like storing and transporting and handling equipment, ballots.
The second safety concern, cybersecurity.
Since the 2016 election, all of our county election officials and our state officials have taken tremendous effort to address what really the new reality is of elections when it comes to potentially foreign interference and these cybersecurity concerns.
Whether you choose to vote at a traditional polling place or opt out for a mail-in ballot, the commission says that both of these ways are completely and equally secure, but that the biggest security concern that they're facing is stopping the spread of misinformation on social media. We're trying to connect with voters to let them know where to go to get your official election information, what those trusted sources are.
Robert says those trusted sources include government websites and verified social media accounts. Ballot canvasser Idris Bayo comes in contact with Arizona voters every day and says he can see how they might be confused by misinformation online.
With the way that the internet is set up and everything like that, anybody could put out something believable that is a lie.
Just because you see something that has my picture on doesn't mean it came from me. Check our social media, check our website.
Secretary Hobbs also mentioned that county officials statewide participate in a monthly security call to go over any issues and provide support.
Michael Bloomberg opened his Arizona campaign office over the weekend. He talked to voters about issues he plans to tackle if elected, and he touched on many important topics, including gun safety laws, health insurance, climate change, and immigration issues. Cronkite News reporter Delaney White has more about the event. Delaney?
Bloomberg supporters packed the downtown venue on Saturday night to hear more about what his campaign entails.
The news is I'll also be spending a lot of time here because the road to the White House runs right through Arizona.
Michael Bloomberg supporters came from across the valley to hear his policies on issues for the 2020 election season.
Getting it done means addressing discrimination and inequality. Getting it done means finally fixing our broken immigration system. Protecting our dreamers and creating a path to citizenship for the 11 million people who are living in the shadows.
Bloomberg says slogan, "Mike will get it done," means he will provide health insurance to every American who lacks it, pass gun safety laws, and tackle immigration issues. These are just a few of his goals.
Having been undocumented and coming to this country when I was 3 years old, his immigration reform plan is the one that is near and dear to my heart.
State Representative Cesar Chavez officially endorsed Bloomberg. He says it is because he feels his message resounds in the state of Arizona as well as the rest of the United States.
You know, anybody who's going to come into the state of Arizona and provide a clear path to victory by investment, by commitment, and ensuring that the people of the state of Arizona are being heard. No other presidential candidate has come to Arizona and has made such an impact like Mike Bloomberg. That is why I'm here, and that is why I've endorsed Mike.
Tonight, Bloomberg's campaign will be talking about gun safety at the Arizona State Capitol. In the studio, Delaney White, Cronkite News.
Our top story today, Iowa caucuses happening right here in Arizona. For the first time ever, satellite Iowa caucuses will be taking place in 4 different locations across the state. Cronkite News reporter Marcela Bayeto shows us how local Arizona Democrats and Iowans are participating in this year's caucuses.
These 4 satellite caucuses in Arizona are part of a larger push by the Iowa Democratic Party to bring more access to Iowan voters who may live out of the state. Now, there's 96 of these satellite caucuses happening all across the nation and even around the entire world. In addition to the caucuses, I visited a local bar where Arizona Democrats will be gathering tonight to watch the Iowa caucus results unfold.
Even though nearly 14,000 miles stand in between Iowa and Arizona, voters here are still getting involved in today's caucuses. At Cobalt Bar in Phoenix, Arizona Democrats will be watching the results of the Iowa caucus, says Maricopa County Democratic Party Chair Steven Slagocki.
We're going to watch to see the results of Iowa caucus, to see who's going to come out on top. It's been a year-long process to get to this point.
And in other parts of Arizona, out-of-state Iowans will be participating in 4 satellite caucuses. 3 of them are being held in Tucson, while 1 is taking place in Queen Creek. James Clark, a temporary director for one of the satellite caucuses that's taking place at a library in Tucson, says the event is needed in order to improve access to out-of-state voters.
The last time that we had caucuses, there was a big uproar about not being available to everyone. So people out of state thought that there should be, and also other people in nursing homes and other places where people couldn't get out to go to the caucus in person. One of the ways to do that.
Since Arizona holds a primary in place of a caucus, here's some basic information on what the process looks like. First off, a caucus is where registered voters of a certain political party decide how the state will allocate their delegates for each party. A caucus has 2 rounds. In the first round, voters will choose the candidate they wish to support. Any candidate with less than 15% of the votes is considered non-viable. Anyone who voted for a non-viable candidate moves back to the center and votes in the second round. These voters have 2 options. They can either relocate to another established candidate, or they can agree to vote for one candidate to make them viable. The number of people in each candidate's corner is tallied, and the appropriate number of delegates are assigned. Delegates will then represent voters at the party's national convention. Regardless of the distance between the 2 states, voters are staying involved, said Slagocki.
And that's pretty exciting that these people who are here are still going to be able to participate in the caucus.
Most of the caucuses are taking place at 6 p.m. tonight, while the one in Queen Creek started already earlier today at 3:30. Results are expected to come in later tonight. Live in the broadcast center, Marcela Bayeto, Cronkite News.
Right now, Planned Parenthood advocates and anti-abortion advocates are facing off over bills some say would limit information on abortions in the state's 211 information system.
Cronkite News reporter Delaney White spoke to both sides of the issue at the Arizona Capitol.
Bills in the House and the Senate would allocate funds for what supporters call a family health program and what opponents call a stealth move to halt reproductive rights.
It's just wrong. The government should not be lying by omission to predominantly women, but just to people who are looking for quality health care.
It's unfortunate that those who favor legalized abortion have strong opposition to a bill designed to help women in need, that this should be a common ground issue. And so there really should be no opposition to this bill. Let's reach women, let's give women the services that they need, and then if they decide to carry their child.
Both pro-choice and anti-abortion advocates shared their views outside the Capitol this morning before the hearing of House Bill 2388. Opponents say the bill would provide millions of dollars to market the 211 system to limit references to abortion and to spend on a program that promotes childbirth over abortion.
If this bill were to pass and if we were to fund this referral system with this caveat, any provider that does any kind of even mentions abortion won't be referred patients who are in need of health care, and so it'll end up with patients having to travel long distances to get the health care that they need when there might be a qualified provider just in their backyard.
Kathy Herod, president of the Center for Arizona Policy, says the bill has the potential to make a positive impact on the lives of mothers.
House Bill 2388, and it provides for a family health pilot program that would provide for alternatives to abortion, and it is modeled after some programs in other states, and it also provides money for the 211 community referral services line.
The executive director of Planned Parenthood Advocates of Arizona says that lawmakers need to consider the rights of women.
I'm here because, unfortunately, there are two bills, one in the Senate and one in the House, that are a direct attack on women's health care and anyone, frankly, that has a uterus on their health care.
The bills are still making their way through the Arizona legislature. In the studio, Delaney White, Cronkite News.
Cronkite News also heard from other members of Arizona's delegation in Washington after the State of the Union speech. Reporter Danielle Malkin joins us to share what they had to say from both sides of the aisle.
And as you might expect, reaction to the president's speech also fell along party lines. Some found it inspiring and others questioning the facts he presented.
The state of our union is stronger than ever before.
President Donald Trump delivered his third State of the Union Tuesday night, tackling topics like a growing U.S. economy and immigration.
The United States of America should be a sanctuary for law-abiding Americans, not criminal aliens.
Arizona lawmakers had mixed reactions to the speech. Democratic Congressman Raul Grijalva criticized the president's rhetoric.
And it became a campaign rally, a pathetic campaign rally, full of misinformation, outright lies, taking credit where credit is not due.
While Arizona's GOP lawmakers sided with Trump.
There's just such antipathy towards this president by some in the other party. It wouldn't matter what he did, what he said. They weren't going to join in celebration of what he might accomplish or what he hopes to accomplish.
Senator Kyrsten Sinema took the opportunity to cross party lines, applauding the success of Republican tax cuts and opportunity zones.
Part of our great Republican tax cuts.
On the other side of the aisle, Arizona's congressional members said they don't believe the speech was partisan whatsoever.
There were a couple places where he was partisan. He was trying to be optimistic. He stayed away from the impeachment. He stayed away from, direct digs at Congress members on the Democrat side for all the impeachment, as he calls it, sham or hoax. And so I thought he tried to be positive.
The president is being invited to a performance of Americano, the musical. It tells the story of Antonio Valdovinos, the son of undocumented immigrants, and his life after learning the truth about his immigration status. Cronkite News reporter Delaney White spoke with Valdovinos about the musical and the invitation. Delaney?
He says he hasn't heard from the White House, but his goal was to humanize the immigrant community by inviting Donald Trump to see the show.
Recognize, a couple years later that I was also in that pot of we don't want you here feeling, and I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it, and I refused to believe it because I remember pledging to the flag every single morning, and I really felt it.
Antonio Valdovinos de la Mora didn't know he was an undocumented immigrant, and he tells the story of what it was like to discover that fact in Americano the Musical.
I was always told that we were in a process, and I knew I was born in Mexico. I definitely knew that, and we just had no need to go for outside employment. We had so much work to do with my father that I grew up having a job without ever earning money. And that was my life.
A life that was impacted on 9/11, like it was for many people. He was inspired to join the military.
And in sixth grade, I had a really life-changing moment when the Twin Towers were hit. My teacher, my PE teacher, was in. His sister was in the towers, and so that day for me was just really confusing to, see what was happening. And obviously, and it's hard for me to re-talk about it, and what it was like to experience it that day.
He recalled the day a recruitment officer showed up at his high school and told Valdovinos he was wasting their time. It was then that he learned the truth about his immigration status.
Wasn't sure what was really happening. My parents, my mom finally just told me the truth. And so at 17, post-graduation month, I was just truly shell-shocked at what was about to happen and why I didn't know about it and what could I do about it. I was told that there was nothing that could be done. And so I think at 17 I was just truly, knocked out of any aspiration that I had.
Though this revelation crushed Valdovinos, he knew his parents had his best interest at heart.
I don't think she ever told me why. I think that I recognized growing into my late 20s that they were just truly trying to protect us.
That's it for this special edition of Cronkite News Tonight. Thanks for joining us. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.